So if John Mateer can ignite this offense, not only can they become a playoff contender, I would take it even one step further. I think this team could legitimately win the national championship. Welcome into another edition of Always College Football. I'm your host, Greg McElroy. We are so happy that you're here with us today, and today is just a little bit different. Why is today a little different? Yes, it is Monday, August 18th. Yes, we are still in the heat of summer. Yes, several teams are still a handful of days away from getting underway and officially kicking off the season, which I acknowledge as opening in significant celebratory form 1 week from Thursday. But for a handful of teams, just a few, this weekend marks week one. I know it's week 0 on paper, but we are playing ball this weekend, guys, and there is so much to look forward to. Yes, we will dive deep into the weeds a little later in the week on Farmageddon and what we're going to see from Dublin, Ireland, between Kansas State and Iowa State. I can't wait. I love week 0. I love that we now have a game to look forward to. I love that game takes place at 11 o'clock Central Time because it's something that I don't have to wait too long for on Saturday morning. When I wake up, I got ball. After just a few hours of playing with the kiddos, we're going to buckle up, ready to roll and watch some college football, a game that could very much play a pretty significant impact on what things look like in the Big 12 this season. So very much looking forward to that. I have asked the last couple weeks to kind of challenge our listeners, and you guys have responded in remarkable fashion. We have asked for y'all to go in, leave a rating, leave a review on your podcast platform of your choosing. That's fine. Doesn't matter which one you use. You guys have answered that call, and you've pushed back against the haters. Against the haters, y'all have done it. Continue on with that practice, please. If you're here with us via the podcast platform, go on, leave a review, leave a rating, whatever you need. We appreciate you guys. We're just covering the sport the best way possible. This is unfiltered. This is unbiased. We're just calling it how we see it. We always have. We call balls and strikes on this show. We will continue to here throughout the course of the season and into the future because we are super excited about this upcoming year because I really believe this. I've said this a handful of times this year. I've said handful like 3 times already, but I don't know why. That's just in my mind today. I don't know why. I've said it like 27 times and it's like 10 o'clock. But I look at this season and it feels like more than ever before, there is access to the playoff. Feels like if things align, if you stay healthy, if you win your toss-up games, if you take care of business at home, if you play clean football, you don't turn it over, there are 35, 36, 37 teams that could make the playoff this year. I really believe that there might be as many as 15 that could win the national championship. That's not completely out of the realm of possibility. Now, is it likely? Probably not. The top teams in the country, usually by season's end, have a way of distancing themselves from the field. But it's as wide open as it felt in quite some time with so many unknowns at the top and so many prove-it moments for teams like Penn State, for Clemson, for some others that feel like the stars have aligned for this season. So looking forward to the year. I know you guys are too. We are officially in season now. We'll just have 2 episodes this week. We'll have 3 next week. And then once we get past week 1, we'll get into our normal in-season 4 episodes where shows will air on Sundays. That's just kind of a rapid-fire recap. Then we get into a little bit deeper dive on Monday with the 10 things we've learned. We'll have a great guest on Wednesday's show, and then we'll do our weekly previews, which are the best in the podcast world for the upcoming Saturday. We will do those each and every Thursday. So lock in. We have a lot of episodes coming your way, but this week we'll do just 2. Today is our annual What If episode, where we dive into the what ifs. Some have to do with week 1 outcomes, and a handful of others have to do with big picture college football. On Thursday, we will give you our hold me to them, lock it, set in stone predictions. So you don't want to miss Thursday's show. We'll also on Thursday do a full preview of Kansas State, Iowa State. So let's kick it off. Our annual What If show here on Always College Football. Let's start with some week 1 games, shall we? It's fresh on the mind of many. We've talked about them throughout the offseason. We've had so many games circled. Let's dive in. And it's easy if we just talk about chalk flying. So let's talk about some potential upsets that could go down in week 1 and what some of the ramifications might look like. We will kick things off for a Sunday night game where Miami will take on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. What if Miami beats Notre Dame? Notre Dame going into this game a slight, just under a field goal favorite on the road against the Hurricanes. This would be the first season opening win for Miami against a ranked opponent since they beat Florida State back in 2009. So it's been a while since they've had a marquee opportunity quite like this where they might be able to take care of business. It would also be Miami's first win over a top 10 team since beating Notre Dame back in 2017. They are 0-8 against top 10 teams since that matchup against the Irish back in 2017. Now, what would need to transpire for Miami to pull off this upset? One, we have to see the Carson Beck of 2023, not the Carson Beck of 2024. Remember in 23, Carson Beck at Georgia, just an amazing season, accurate, decisive. Going into 24, he was the Heisman frontrunner. He was the guy that everyone anticipated potentially being the number one overall pick. We need to see the previous version of Carson Beck, where he's decisive, where he's accurate, where he's got a clean pocket. He's delivering the ball to a wide receiver group that will be challenged on the outside by a remarkably physical secondary. We know Notre Dame defensively at all three levels is one of the best teams in college football. They are so good on that side of the ball. Marcus Freeman has long made that a huge priority. They play physical, they play tough. They play man coverage, they blitz you, they got great linebackers, and I think they could have improved edge defenders this year with what they have coming back. That means that if Miami wins this game, their young crop of wide receivers were probably up to the challenge of going against a ridiculously good secondary. It also probably means that Miami's offensive line, one of the best groups in the country, they stepped up against what should be one of the better defensive lines, one of the deeper, more disruptive defensive lines that we'll see in the sport this upcoming season. And what was the one Achilles heel last year of Miami? It was their secondary. Well, new defensive coordinator, Corey Heatherman, comes down from Minnesota, implements a little bit more, I don't want to call it a vanilla style, but a little bit less aggressive style, kind of lets the players play, and they respond in this new look defense. So that's probably what happened if Miami's going to pull off the upset. Now, what does this mean for the big picture of college football? Well, it now welcomes the possibility of Miami down the road, say late November, when being measured up against another team in Notre Dame when it comes to the college football playoff. And Miami in this scenario would have that head-to-head, which means the likelihood of the ACC getting two teams in the college football playoff like they did a year ago increases dramatically. And I know it's week one. I know people will probably look at Notre Dame and say, well, they lost week two, still made the playoff. I get that. That was last year for sure. But if going head to head against a team that beat them when being evaluated at season's end, that could be a difficult argument to make on behalf of the Fighting Irish. So Miami, and bigger picture for the ACC, it would be enormous if Miami were to pull off this upset, because the ACC is hoping to get two in. We know their champion will go. Most people point to Clemson as the likely champion out of the ACC this year. If Miami beats another team that will likely be in the at-large category at season's end, that could be huge for the league as a whole. So massive fallout, massive implications, and we kind of just documented exactly how Miami might be able to get that done in week one. That game, check it out, Sunday night, ABC at 7:30 Eastern time. No other college football going on. So if you're not with us watching that game, you're probably doing something wrong, or you just don't love ball. That's perfectly fine. Let's go to scenario number two and what if number two. What if LSU beats Clemson on the road? That's also a week one game. This game will be Saturday night. It will be on ABC. Right now, Clemson is about a 4-point favorite over the Bayou Bengals. Now, what is the bigger picture fallout here? Well, this would be massive for the Southeastern Conference. Okay. This will be significant. Now, the SEC doesn't often need any momentum in the court of public opinion, they are almost always given the benefit of the doubt. And understandably, if you look at the SEC's performances over the last 20 years in playoff scenarios, they've fared really well. LSU has won multiple national championships in the last 20 years, 07 and in 19. And on the biggest stage, LSU has played well when given that opportunity. So this would be huge for the SEC, because if it comes down to season's end and the SEC's, say, third, fourth place team in LSU has a win over the potential ACC champion, think about how much this could benefit the SEC's at-large field. So it won't affect Clemson. Clemson still wins the ACC. They still go to the playoff. We know that. But if LSU now has a win against them, that will only benefit their argument to be made at season's end. So possible playoff ramifications in week one for LSU. Now, how does LSU do it? LSU is going to have to be really good along the offensive line. That's the entire question mark going into this one. We know how good Clemson is along the defensive front. We know that Peter Wood's a defensive tackle. We know TJ Parker a defensive end. We know the second level defenders that they have that could potentially take over the game. We know how good they've been on the perimeter. It means that LSU held up in protection and gave Garrett Nussmeier plenty of opportunities to throw the ball downfield, to try to take advantage of some of the matchup nightmares that they can create on the outside with their improved wide receiver core. So that's probably how LSU got it done. Now, how did Clemson lose? Maybe LSU's newly disruptive defensive front. Maybe their new additions defensively, their new additions on the outside at corner step up against elite level wide receivers for Clemson. Maybe their defensive front creates some problems with their pass rush and applies pressure to Cade Klubnik. Maybe LSU's second level defenders, with Weeks coming back from injury, Harold Perkins, remember him? Maybe he becomes the game changer that he's always been destined to become. Maybe those are the things that happen for LSU en route to pulling off a significant upset on the road against one of the top teams in college football on paper coming into the season. Now let's go to the other side of this game. What if Clemson beats LSU? You're going to say, well, then chalk flew, and that's not a big deal. Not so fast, my friend. Why? Because Brian Kelly in that scenario would drop to 0-4 in season openers as the head coach for the Tigers. Remember, he lost to Florida State in his opener. He lost the following year to an undefeated Florida State team that was really, really good. No shame in losing that game. And then he lost last year in what was very disappointing fashion to an SC team that would go on to underachieve. If he were to lose this game, I think if you look at it in a bigger picture, you'd say, okay, well, he lost to a team with more known commodities coming into the year. It should not be some massive indicator of where LSU goes from here, because we've seen LSU lose week one like they did back in 2021, only to rally to make the not to make the college football playoff, but to make the SEC championship game. So it's not necessarily an indicator of what LSU could become this year, but I think the noise around LSU's program, with what they added in the portal this year, with all the pieces that they have coming back, with the upgrades that they've made at certain positions, with the veteran leadership they have at quarterback, if they go on the road and lose convincingly to Clemson, that could be a huge problem and kind of set the stage and set the narrative for LSU moving forward. To where regardless of how many games Brian Kelly won from that point forward, people would still point back to the performance and the lack of performance, frankly, in season openers over the last few years. It also might lead to Brian Kelly approaching the offseason even more different the following year, because people have said, well, he has already been very outspoken about how they've changed their mindset going into this game, that they used to treat week one as if it was just any other game. They have now adjusted that and said, no, we're making this Clemson team, we're making this into a massive deal. This is our Super Bowl. Granted, it's week one, but this is our Super Bowl. So they've already made that adjustment. But if they do come up short, what will the narrative be surrounding Brian Kelly going into the rest of the season? Probably won't be a real positive one. Let's be honest with that. Let's go next to another week one game. What if Florida State beats Alabama? This game is currently hovering around 2 touchdowns. Alabama officially about a 13.5-point favorite on the road in Tallahassee against a revitalized Florida State football team. Now, Alabama has not started the season 0-1 since 2001. They lost to UCLA in the season opener back then. Alabama also was dealt some unfortunate news this past weekend when Jam Miller, their starting running back, is set to miss an extended period of time with an upper body injury. Without going into too much detail, it's in this vicinity. For those of you that are watching on the YouTube channel, it's a problem. There's hopes that he could be back for Georgia, but that's not until the end of September. We know he won't be available for Florida State. What does that mean for the pecking order that stands alongside Ty Simpson, who's making his first career start in hostile territory? Now, how does FSU do it? Well, they probably do it with some smoke and mirrors offensively. Because if there's one thing Gus Malzahn has done a really good job of over the course of his career, dating back to his time at Auburn as a coordinator, dating back to his time as a head coach at Auburn, even in the early going at his time at UCF, he's done a really good job of creating confusion defensively. He's done a really good job when he has a really mobile option at the quarterback spot, and he has that this year with Thomas Castellanos. Now, Thomas Castellanos has been very outspoken this offseason, talking about how he's going to do all these amazing things to the Crimson Tide's defense. And if you look back, and several have cited the success that Gus Malzahn has traditionally had when playing against Alabama. The difference this year, though, is that Alabama is not running the Nick Saban defense. The Nick Saban defense, pattern match, a lot of man coverage, they would occasionally lose sight of what was going on behind the line of scrimmage when the quarterback became a run threat. This is an Alabama defense that is a little bit more based in zone. Still run a lot of man, not going to get away from what they've always done. They still have great cover guys on the outside, but there's going to be more eyes in the backfield. You know what that leads to? Less opportunities for the opposing quarterback to manufacture big plays with his legs. So if FSU is going to beat Alabama, I think they're going to have to do so by creating big plays downfield. We know that they've revamped their wide receiver core. I like the additions that they made at wide receiver. I'm also going to operate under the assumption that Squirrel White will be at 100% for this game. He's nursed a little bit of an injury throughout fall camp. So I don't think Florida State's going to just beat Bama by running the football right down their throat. I don't anticipate that. If they're going to do it, it's going to have to be by creating big plays. And the only way to do that is to find Deuce on the outside, where he's a matchup nightmare, working against outstanding corners for the Crimson Tide. It's also going to mean that Florida State's defense, a newly revamped defense with a new defensive system, with Coach White coming down from Nebraska, they're going to maybe create some confusion. Maybe they get some pressure on Ty Simpson. Maybe they bottle up whatever running back fills in for Jam Miller. Maybe they do a really good job in winning some of the one-on-ones on the outside that Alabama is going to try to create on a down-in, down-out basis. This would be a massive upset, and one that I do not forecast at this point. But if they do, think about what this could mean for Florida State. It would be, in a roundabout way, I know we're a few years removed, but it'd be revenge for what transpired 2 years ago. Florida State was 13-0. Alabama was 12-1. Alabama was put in the playoff. Florida State was left in disappointment and disbelief by being out there in 2023. This would be revenge for that. But if you go a step further, it would be a bigger proof of concept for what Mike Norvell is going to do long-term. Last year, I think 2024, most people will point to, that was a blip on the radar. That is not an indicator of future success for Florida State. It was an indicator of a bottoming out off of what was an incredibly great year the year before. I can't imagine Florida State is playing to that level again. I think Florida State is going to be a 7-8, maybe even a 9-win team. I don't think they get this one against Bama, but if they do, it'd be massive to create some momentum and to excite some of that revenge from a year ago. This would really energize the fan base if Florida State can get this one done. As far as Alabama, if they come up short, there's going to be a ton of criticism. This was supposed to be a year where they were breaking through. They talked all off season about the continuity, the buy-in that the players had. This would be kind of a dose of reality if they come up short in this one. So it'd be significant, the conversation around Kalen DeBoer, the conversation around the team, and not showing up against a quality opponent in Florida State on the road. Remember last year, Bama struggled on the road. Now they'll go on the road week 1, do some of the challenges of last year, carry over into this year. Those are all things that could come out in the event in which Florida State pulls the significant upset there week 1. I still think Bama gets it done, but the fallout from this game could be massive for not just the ACC, but for Florida State and for the SEC and Alabama. Moving on to another game in week 1, probably no bigger than this one. This will be Texas and Ohio State. What if Texas or Ohio State blows out their opponent in week 1? I'm not talking about this game comes down to the wire and the newly named Ohio State starter, Julian Sayin, leads his team down. They kick a game-winning field goal. They win the game by 3. Or vice versa. Arch Manning leads his team down. They kick a game-winning field goal. Texas wins by 3. I'm not talking about that scenario. I'm talking a close loss would not be crippling given our current format and the opportunities that Ohio State and Texas have to bounce back all over the schedule. But let's just say this game looks a little bit like Michigan and Texas from a year ago, where it got sideways in a hurry. And next thing you know, man, Texas in that scenario last year, they're rolling Ohio State. And all of a sudden the narrative starts to surround the Buckeyes. Or the other side of the coin. If Ohio State goes out and blows out Texas, what does that say about the departures off last year's team? To have 14 players drafted to go up against the AP number 1 ranked team and just knock their socks off in week 1. What's the fallout? Let's talk first. If Texas blows out Ohio State, 1, it means Arch Manning probably lit it up, right? It means Arch Manning played up to his potential. We'll talk a little more about that here in just a minute. It means Arch Manning and this wide receiver core, they were absolutely dynamic. It means the Texas offensive line, which was a bit of a question mark coming into the season, they controlled the line of scrimmage. They limited the potential negative plays that Ohio State can create. It also means that Texas's defense didn't skip a beat. And maybe that edge defenders, those rushers off the outside, they really rattle the first-time starting quarterback Julian Sayin. Those could all definitely come to fruition. But what is the fallout for Ohio State if that happens? Well, it's going to go back to maybe Ohio State is not a team that can immediately reload. Maybe Ohio State's team last year really was one of those teams that was generationally good, and the production and the leadership that was lost off last year's roster, maybe it might take some time for them to get back to playing up to their potential. Now you look, I think regardless of what happens in this game, I think Texas and Ohio State are going to find themselves in the playoffs. So either way, I think if you look at their schedule, they're both in a really good spot to bounce back, even if the game gets sideways in favor of the opposition. But either way, I think Texas, that means that Arch Manning played great. The offensive line was great. Defensively, they didn't skip a beat. Let's go to the other side. Ohio State blows out Texas. Well, here's the reaction. It doesn't matter what was lost. Ohio State does not skip a beat. Ryan Day is recruited too well. They're too talented. They have too much skill on the outside. Doesn't matter who their quarterback is. You can have a veteran in Will Howard. You can have a superstar in C.J. Stroud. You can even have Kyle McCord, who I think was kind of underrated a couple years back when he was the starting quarterback. Doesn't matter who you have at quarterback. The machine continues to roll along. And Ohio State, in the event in which they knock Texas Longhorns out, it would send a massive message to all of college football. Like, doesn't matter. We're young. Who cares? Look how talented we are. Doesn't matter how young our quarterback is. We still have incredible weapons on the outside. Doesn't matter how much we lost on defense, including our defensive coordinator. We can still get after you. We can still apply pressure. We can still cause problems. We can still force you into making mistakes. If Ohio State blows out Texas, it'd be a way bigger story, I think, than if Texas were to go up there and blow out Ohio State. Texas has more pieces back that are known. Ohio State has a handful of pieces that are unknown. If those unknown pieces knock the Texas Longhorns out, look out, college football, because I would think in that scenario, Ohio State's football, they're only going to get better. They're only going to get sharper. They're only going to improve as the season goes along. So massive Massive fallouts if that game gets sideways in one direction or the other. And in the event in which Texas and or Ohio State were to lose 2 or 3, we all know what the conversation would be. It's going to go right back to this game. Well, who won? In the event in which those two teams are battling for an at-large, we know that head-to-head should reign supreme. If Ohio State beats Texas, they should have a leg up. If Texas beats Ohio State, they should have a leg up when it comes to Selection Day 3-4 months from now. Let's dive into a few bigger picture conversations, shall we? Let's do some national championship, Heisman, what have you, okay? Let's start with the team that I think on paper is as well equipped to win the national championship as anybody in the entire country, and that's the Penn State Nittany Lions. What if Penn State loses to Oregon and Ohio State this season? Currently, right now, Penn State, and I know it's way look ahead, it's a lot of weeks from now, it could be a totally different number when the game gets here. But currently, here in the preseason, Penn State is about a 6-point favorite over the Oregon Ducks at home. On the road at Ohio State, they're about a 3-point underdog. So either side of the coin, both those games are absolutely losable for Penn State. But this will be the first time. And while many have made a career off of being critical of James Franklin, this is the first time where I actually look at the rosters with what Ohio State has, with what Oregon has, and with what Penn State has. And of those three, I'm taking Penn State for sure. That's in the preseason. This could adjust as we see what Oregon has, as we see what Ohio State has. But as far as known commodities and proven production, Penn State has an advantage. They have an advantage from an experience standpoint. They have an advantage from a maturity standpoint. So this could be the first time where if Penn State were to lose to both those teams, you could point to coaching. And James Franklin, in the event in which he loses both these games, in a year in which they brought everybody back to go make a run, and not just a Big Ten title, but a national title, you could point exclusively to the mistakes that their coaching staff might have made. You go out, you go get Jim Knowles, defensive coordinator from Ohio State. He comes over, not just bringing an incredibly good track record of coaching high-level defense, but also he's bringing over the blueprint that Ohio State used to beat Penn State the last couple of years. Well, now Jim Knowles is on that staff, and you go on the road, lose at the Buckeyes. Not going to be an easy pill to swallow for James Franklin and for Jim Knowles. As far as Andy Kotelnick is concerned, if this happens, it means they probably didn't find an adequate replacement for Tyler Warren. Maybe they had some inconsistencies at the quarterback spot because Drew Aller might have missed a throw or two that he should have made to potentially put the game on ice in favor of the Nittany Lions. Maybe they weren't able to run the football with a really solid offensive line and incredible cast at running back. Maybe they didn't revamp the wide receiver spot where they went out and relied heavily on transfer portal players to improve a position of weakness from a year ago. Maybe they didn't adequately replace Abdul Carter. Maybe Denida Sutton continues to be a really solid player, but maybe not a take over the game guy like Abdul Carter was a year ago. So massive fallout for James Franklin and for Penn State if they can't get it done this year, because most will react strongly in the event in which they lose their two marquee games. Probably warranted, frankly, based on what they have coming into the season. Going next to a player that needs no introduction. What if Arch Manning lives up to the expectations? Now, I must first, before we answer that question, establish what the expectations are. He right now is the Heisman frontrunner in the preseason. The guy has started 2 games in his college career. One against Mississippi State, who last year was the 126th ranked defense in the country, and one against Louisiana Monroe, not a team that should be able to compete with the Texas Longhorns from a personnel standpoint. But our expectations for Arch Manning are so outrageous that if he lives up to it, not only will he take home the Heisman Trophy, but in all likelihood, Texas will win their first national championship in the last 20 years. Because our expectations are for him to go out, throw for 40-plus touchdowns. Is that fair? Probably not. but the expectations are so astronomical that 40 touchdowns seems like it's somewhat within reason. He might rush for 7, 8, 9 touchdowns, maybe 10, knowing that his mobility, his athleticism is going to be a huge part of what this offense could potentially attack you with. It means that his wide receiver core lives up to the billing, because while many people will push back on this, it's really hard to play quarterback by yourself. And if you look at what was lost the last couple of years at wide receiver, you would think maybe, just maybe Texas's wide receivers aren't as good this year. I push back on that. I think that group's going to be elite. And by season's end, I think it'll be a top 3, top 4 group in the entire country at wide receiver. It means the offensive line did a tremendous job of protecting him, took some of the pressure off him by running the football, especially when they get in the red zone, an area that was a bit of a struggle last year. But for Arch Manning to live up to expectations would be almost impossible, because our expectations are probably a little unfair. Now, I'm super excited. I'm super bullish. I would never bet against this young man. But I also think, too, our expectations have gotten to the point where regardless of what he does, every superhuman play he might make this year, you're probably not even going to be wowed, because that's the expectation that you have going into the year. But if he lives up to the expectations, go ahead, book it right now. Arch will take home the Heisman Trophy, and Texas will win the national championship. That's how good he might be this season. Moving to the other side of the Red River rivalry, let's do this one, huh? What if John Mateer, new quarterback at Oklahoma, is Cam Ward 2.0? You're probably asking, why are you even making this comparison? Well, how could you not? They both played at Washington State under offensive coordinator Ben Arbuckle. Now, there's a lot of familiarity with John Mateer, who is going to be reunited with Arbuckle at Oklahoma. This is a system that's really awesome for quarterbacks. They do a great job of creating space. Both Mateer and Cam Ward were outrageously productive at Washington State. If you look at the numbers, Mateer's numbers are actually significantly better than that of Cam Ward while they're on the Palouse. In 2024, he had 44 total touchdowns, 29 through the air, 15 on the ground, 3,100 yards, 800 plus rushing last season. For context, just the year before, when Cam Ward was playing for the Cougars, he had 25 passing touchdowns, so 4 less than John Mateer, and only 8 rushing scores there while at Washington State. So those numbers, 4 less passing, 7 less rushing. Now, there is a little bit of a pushback there when we're going to stats, because Cam Ward played against a legitimate Pac-12 schedule. So he had to play against the likes of Oregon. He had to play against some of the best teams that college football had to offer. Whereas last year, John Mateer played mostly Mountain West, did have a few schools, did play Washington, did play Oregon State, did play some Power Fives, but did kind of pad some stats against some less than stellar competition. But if you really look at the two, the one thing Mateer has that Cam Ward does not have, or not that he doesn't have, but he doesn't really want to utilize in his game, is he's a much bigger threat to run. That's the biggest difference, is that John Mateer and Cam Ward, when you look at Cam Ward's rushing statistics over the course of his career, that's 3 years as a starter, 2 at Washington State, 1 at Miami, he accumulated just 406 career rushing yards. Not bad at all, by the way. Solid, not bad, not crazy, but not bad whatsoever. Well, Mateer in just one season last year doubled him up at 827. Both guys have tremendous playmaking ability. Mateer's phenomenal with the off-platform throws. He can extend plays. He can turn what is a broken play into an explosive play, not just with his legs, but with his arms. And I think if this were to come to fruition, not only would Oklahoma immediately be thrust in the college football playoff conversation, because last year it wasn't the defense that was problematic, it was the offense. So revitalizing this offense would be enormous. Last year, they were 97th in scoring. They were 81st in total QBR. Washington State, comparably, was 26th. So a 55-spot jump in total QBR. They were 129th last year in yards per dropback. They were one of just 5 teams last year to go along with Michigan, by the way, just to kind of put things in the same perspective. Michigan was at 4.84 last year, yards per dropback. They were 130th. Oklahoma was 129th at 4.99. So we've long documented the struggles that Michigan had at quarterback. Well, yeah, Oklahoma, when they dropped back, was about the same as Michigan. So if John Mateer can ignite this offense, not only can they become a playoff contender, I would take it even one step further. I think this team could legitimately win the national championship. Now, Cam Ward went on to become the number 1 overall pick. He was a top 4 Heisman Trophy vote getter. He was incredible last year for Miami. Incredible. Did so many amazing things. If Mateer can do the same things at Oklahoma that Cam Ward did at Miami, look out, man. They have a really, really talented wide receiver core, assuming they can stay healthy, which is a big assumption because last year was a huge problem. Hopefully, it means their offensive line played quite a bit better than they did a year ago, where they were a little bit up and down. We already know that their defensive line has a chance to be one of the best D-lines in the entire SEC. We already know that Brent Venables is elite from a defensive play calling standpoint. If they can just fix the offense, and I do believe that John Mateer could be that one guy that could elevate every other player around him, this team goes from a spoiler to a contender immediately. So if that happens, man, look out. It'll be a lot of fun to watch the Sooners this year. Go next to the Sooners' former conference. What if the Big 12 gets 2 teams in the college football playoff? A lot of people have a hard time acknowledging this possibility. Why? Because if you really look at the Big 12 across the board, to go get to the point where you're 10-2, 11-1 is going to be a monumental task. Because across the board, man, the margins between all these teams are so outrageously close. It'd be like the equivalent of looking at the NFL and anticipating 2 teams going 16-1 or 15-2. It'd be kind of unlikely because the margins of the NFL, much like Big 12, is pretty dang small. But if the Big 12 gets 2 teams in, what happened? Well, it means that they really had a tremendous non-conference season. It means that when Baylor welcomes Auburn to town just a week from Friday, they knocked off Auburn. Now, is Auburn a playoff contender? Probably not. Maybe in some people's eyes they are. Baylor, in some people's eyes, they are. If the stars can align, they could pick up where they left off at the end of the regular season last year. But if Baylor knocks off Auburn, that's just a feather in the cap against the SEC. You get a win against the SEC, there's going to be tremendous reaction. Let's say TCU goes on the road, beats North Carolina, a game that everyone will be watching. On Monday night, standalone, no one else is watching college football that night. Well, that's the only game in town. So if TCU goes on the road in a marquee matchup against Bill Belichick and gets a win, they should win that game, by the way. That'd be huge for the conference. It means that Kansas might have gone on the road in week 2 and beat Missouri. Now, that rivalry is back. Glad that it is. It's been dormant for a long time. Massive matchup. Kansas, I think, is a very dangerous team this year. Missouri has a lot of new pieces. They are at home, so advantage Missouri. And as far as the line of scrimmage, probably advantage Missouri. But still, if Kansas go on the road, get Missouri, that would improve the likelihood of the perception of the Big 12 being a little different because another win against a potential SEC team. Arizona State goes on the road and handles Mississippi State. They should. They should be a heavy favorite in that game. Mississippi State's one of the worst teams in the SEC, but another win potentially against its SEC team. Kansas beats Missouri, Baylor beats Auburn, Arizona State beats Mississippi State. Pretty good when taking things into account for the Big 12 and their prospects of getting multiple teams in. Colorado plays against Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech's a team that a lot of people really like coming out of the ACC. If Colorado knocks off Georgia Tech, another huge opportunity for the Big 12. So they probably fared really well in those games against the non-conference. I'll give you a couple bonus wins here. What if Oklahoma State goes on the road to Oregon and gives Oregon all they want? I'm not saying that they need to necessarily win the game. Let's say that game resembles the Boise State game from a year ago, where Oklahoma State loses by a touchdown against a team that's probably in the playoff at season's end. Now, I'm not in for moral victories, but when you're a team like Oklahoma State that's picked kind of near the bottom of the Big 12 and they go on the road to a Big 10 team with national title hopes and they give them all they want, that'd be huge for the league. A couple of Utah at UCLA, West Virginia at Pitt, the backyard brawl, massive opportunity there. Let's say Iowa loses at Iowa State in the Cy-Hawk Trophy. That'd be huge. So all these games, they have an impact on Kansas State's perception. They have an impact on Utah's perception. They impact Texas Tech. I didn't mention Texas Tech at all in this conversation, but if the rest of the league takes care of business, then it could have a trickle-down effect with how the Big 12 is perceived overall. So I think for the Big 12 to get 2 in, they need to do an amazing job of taking care of business against SEC, Big 10, and ACC opponents there in the first few weeks of the regular season. What if the Tennessee Volunteers get high-level quarterback play from Joey Aguilar? Now, he's been named the starting quarterback, not a huge surprise. I think most people coming into that competition anticipated it was his job to lose. He did nothing to lose it. I think there's a couple other guys I actually kind of like their depth at the position now based on what we've heard about some of the backups, but it's Aguilar moving forward. And those that are saying, well, if we can just get him to play a little bit like Hendon Hooker did a couple years ago, we'll be in great shape. That's asking a lot. Because if you look at what Hendon Hooker did, let's just say in 2022, I would say that was an elite season, super elite season. He led the FBS in QBR. So the guy was off the charts good last year. I don't think they need that level of performance from their quarterback to get back into the playoff conversation. They need him to be really, really good. If they get high-level quarterback play from Aguilar, you can just go ahead and book it. Tennessee is going to be in a position to get into the college football playoff yet again, which would be massive given some of the preseason expectations for the Volunteers this year. They come in ranked 24th in the AP poll. They were picked to finish 9th in the preseason SEC media poll behind Texas, Georgia, Bama, LSU, South Carolina, Florida, Ole Miss, and A&M. They were picked to finish behind all 8 of those teams. And if you look at Aguilar, he's played a lot of football. At Appalachian State, he started for 2 seasons, threw for nearly 7,000 yards, 56 touchdowns, 24 picks. It's the picks that I'll be watching most closely. This is an offense that puts a lot on the quarterback's decision-making, but if they can run the ball as well as I hope they can run the ball, then that should make things a little bit easier for Joey Aguilar. I think he's going to be really solid, by the way. He's a veteran. He's played a lot of football. He knows what to do when the defense presents a look that might be uncomfortable. If he's caught off guard, he's got some mobility to get them out of a jam. So I think he's going to have a really nice season. It's just if we get that next layer up where he becomes a top 3, top 4 quarterback in the SEC, Tennessee can go from preseason ranked maybe 9th in the league to preseason top 2, 3, 4, you name it, because the rest of the team should be pretty solid. I'm sneaky bullish on Tennessee if they can get really good quarterback play this year. What if DJ Lagway has a Heisman Trophy level season? This would be a lot of fun, right? This would be a lot of fun. And by the way, there are plenty of opportunities for, quote, Heisman moments for DJ Lagway this year. We know how many teams they play. We know how tough the schedule is. We know it's a gauntlet. We know that Florida can do a few different things. We know they're going to be rugged, right? We know they're going to be really, really committed to running the football with their offensive line, the returns intact and improved in many areas. We know they can pound it with Jaden Baugh, Jacoby Jackson, Trayon Webb. They should be really, really good and deep at running back. There are a couple questions at wide receiver, but I'm pretty optimistic about that group as a whole. If DJ Lagway turns in a Heisman Trophy level season, Florida can contend and win the national championship this year. They really can. Because if they can control the line of scrimmage, they can get after people from their own defensive line against the opposing quarterback on the other side, this team has all the makings. You could talk all you want about the schedule. Well, if Florida goes 9-3, they should be in the playoff. They should. Now, if they get blown out in their 3 losses, or maybe their 3 losses against average competition, that might not be able to be overlooked. But with the amount of Heisman Trophy moments that could be had by DJ Lagway, that means he's victorious in their biggest games. If he brings home the most coveted individual award in sports, that means Florida's well on their way to establishing themselves as a legitimate contender for the foreseeable future. I really like this Florida team. I know the schedule's hard. It might be too much, but I still believe that if their quarterback plays up to his potential, they can beat anybody in the sport. I will continue to believe that until proven otherwise. What if the college football playoff becomes a brand fest? And what do I mean by that? It means the biggest brands in the sport get the benefit of the doubt on selection day. Meaning basically the college football playoff becomes pretty chalky across the board. Now last year, we had a couple of, quote, Cinderellas when you look at SMU, kind of a Cinderella. Great year last year, kind of a Cinderella with what they did throughout the regular season and finding their way to the postseason. You look at Indiana, to go from a 3-9 all the way to the playoff the following year. We already know the current format, right? We know that the top 4 leagues are going to get their 4 conference champions in. So let's just go with the favorites right now. The Big Ten, the favorites, Ohio State. SEC is Texas. The ACC is Clemson. The Big 12 is Arizona State. So those 4 are in, right? No, not a huge surprise. Shouldn't require a whole lot of explanation. That's not our picks. I'm just going with the favorites according to Vegas. You're going to get the one non-Power 4 champion in as well. Right now, the favorite is Boise State. But let's just say the at-large looks like this. You get Bama, Georgia, LSU out of the SEC. Those are the 2, 3, and 4 teams in the SEC by odds. Let's get Oregon, Penn State, and Michigan out of the Big Ten. Those are the next 3 by odds. And then you get Notre Dame. That means you get 4 from the SEC, 4 from the Big Ten, 1 from the ACC, 1 from the Big 12, the group of 5 champ in Boise State, and Notre Dame. What does this do for the future playoff format? Does having a really chalky postseason where all the favorites going into the season all make the playoff, does that accelerate the move to 16 teams? Does this lead potentially to the ACC and the Big 12 warming up to the automatic qualifier format that Tony Petitti and the Big Ten have been pushing the last couple weeks or the last couple months or maybe even the last year or so? Remember the automatic qualifier were 4 from the Big Ten, 4 from the SEC, 2 from the ACC, 2 from the Big 12, 1 from the G5, and then 2 at-larges. Does this accelerate getting to that point? Because part of what made last year really fun and exciting were teams like Indiana going from the worst case scenario the year before to a playoff team. From Arizona State, who was picked to finish last in the Big 12 last year, to a playoff team. To an SMU team that was playing Power 4 football for the first time in nearly 4 decades into the postseason, into the playoffs. Last year was kind of fun. So if chalk flies when it comes to selection day, will that accelerate and open up the idea of maybe mixing things up in future playoff formats? I hope it doesn't, because I kind of like where we're at right now, but it wouldn't surprise me. When we've seen chalk fly in the past, when Bama got in to play LSU in 2015 or in 2011 over Oklahoma State, what did that lead to? The adoption of the 4-team playoff model. When Bama got in against Florida State, when Florida State was undefeated and Bama was 12-1, what did that lead to? An acceleration into the 12-team model. So we've seen chalk fly in the past. Next thing you know, we have changes to our postseason format. If chalk flies this year, will the same situation arise? What if the, quote, portal teams from this year don't live up to expectations? So the top 10 portal teams are as follows. LSU, number 1, Texas Tech 2, Miami 3, Ole Miss 4. Oregon was 5, but I'm going to remove them from the discussion because they only added 11 players. So they added high profile transfers, but only 11 is not going to necessarily affect how we evaluate the team's culture moving forward. So let's remove Oregon, even though they're top 5. Florida State brought in 23 players. Mizzou was 7, Auburn 8, North Carolina brought in 41 players from the portal last year, and Kentucky rounded out the top 10 with 26 new additions. If the portal teams don't live up to expectations, will this alter off-season behavior for coaches moving forward? Because these teams have all upgraded from a talent standpoint. But what do they sacrifice in an effort to become more talented on their roster? Did they sacrifice culture? Did they sacrifice continuity? If these teams underachieve this year, will that lead to more coaches in the future saying, you know what, let's resist the temptation to go in the portal and let's just do it with homegrown high school talent that has been developed over the course of years? That'll be a really interesting conversation. So I just listed those top 10 teams. If those top 10 teams collectively will reevaluate this at season's end, if they underachieve, what will the trickle down be if that actually happens this season? On the other side of the coin, we'll group these together. What if Clemson wins the national championship? Well, What has Dabo Swinney resisted from the beginning? Going to the portal. What has he prioritized? High school players, retaining his talent, retaining his roster. They did add a couple pieces in the portal this year to kind of fortify some positions, to add some depth, to add some quality at premier spots like a defensive end. So it's not like they're completely against going to the portal, but a vast majority of their roster has been on campus for a number of years. If Clemson goes on to win the national championship, it will be proof of concept for Dabo Swinney. I think he'll make sure that we all know about it, including Tyler from Spartanburg, who called into that radio show famously a couple years ago and talked about where Clemson was. It might actually open teams up to the possibility of, hey, you know what? We can maybe live through a 9-win season if we know a year or two from now we're going to make a run at the title. That's not where we currently live in college football. You're expected to win 10 plus every year, especially if you're at a blue blood program. If you don't win 10, you might as well just throw everybody out. But if Clemson goes and wins it, maybe people will have more patience. I don't think it's likely because I know how college football fans, I know how I respond on a year-to-year basis. I try to be a little bit more level-headed than most, but I can't expect fans to be level-headed. I don't want fans to be level-headed. But if Clemson goes and wins the national championship, maybe there will be more teams that will be open to maybe waiting a couple years and circling seasons every third year or so where they can truly make a run with an experienced quarterback and an experienced roster that's played a lot of football together. So put the portal teams and the Clemson National Championship all kind of in the same bucket. If those teams that relied heavily on the portal regress and underperform, and if Clemson goes and wins the national championship, it could be a massive shift in philosophy in the future as it relates to how teams approach the portal in the offseason. And then finally, what if the Big Ten wins their third consecutive national championship? Now, a lot of potential fallout from this, right? Would this lead to the Big Ten potentially having more say at the table when it comes to future playoff format? I don't think that'll happen. I think the SEC and the Big Ten are in lockstep when it comes to the amount of power and influence they have in those conversations. But it might point further to retaining guys from the NFL where they could have gone and become a second or third round pick. Instead, they decide to come back, chase a championship, cash a big NIL check, and collectively pursue the highest levels of the sport. Because let's just say maybe it's Penn State that goes and wins the national championship this year. Then it would kind of give everyone the blueprint on how to win. How did Michigan win 2 years ago? Well, they had a bunch of guys that could have gone to the NFL. They said, no. The NFL can wait. It'll be there in the future. Let's go back to Ann Arbor and go chase a championship. They go and win it. Ohio State in 2024, same exact thing. Had a bunch of guys that could go. They decided not to. Hey, let's all come back. Let's go chase a championship. They win it. Penn State's that team this year. If they now go and win the national championship, then it will show everybody the importance of talent retention over, in this current format, over new toys, over flashy transfer portal products. We'd better off retaining our talent that could go to the NFL, make sure those guys are comfortable, bring them back, that we've got leadership and a collective goal. So if the Big Ten wins their third consecutive national championship, it'd be a banner opportunity for them to say at the top of the sport, we are the very best. And nobody could push back if they have a third different team win a championship in the third consecutive year. Before we get you out of here, I just want to point to something that has really kind of irritated me. If I want to be completely honest, it's this brand new college football playoff proposal that's been put out by the Big Ten. And for those of you that are unaware, the Big Ten has suggested maybe we move to 24 teams or 28 teams in the college football playoff. Take that proposal. It's not worth the paper that it's written on right now. It's ridiculous. It is absolutely ridiculous because I, like most of you that have long been watching college football, we do something in this sport that most other sports don't do. We put a high premium on performance in the regular season. And for those of you that said, well, we went to the 12-team playoff and it only added more intrigue to games that would not in the past have had college football playoff implications. So a game like BYU and Arizona State, that's a game that a couple years ago wouldn't have mattered. Now that game has college football playoff implications. Awesome. You know what you did at the same time? By making sure that Arizona State and BYU mattered, you watered down the importance of Ohio State, Michigan. What game's more important to college football? BYU, Arizona State, or Ohio State, Michigan? I think we all know the answer to that. No disrespect to BYU, no disrespect to Arizona State. But what there is right now in college football, there is only so much importance that can be spread around to all the games. And it's awesome if you're a team that has not ever had access to the playoff. And maybe if we go to a 2018 playoff, maybe there is that remote chance of you knocking things down and making the field at 7-5. That's awesome. What are you going to do when you get there? I don't really care, to be honest with you, because I've always felt like the top teams have always separated themselves, and you have to be perfect in the regular season, because in the BCS era, you had to be perfect for the most part to get to the playoff and win a championship. In the 14 playoff era, for the most part, you had to win your conference, and you almost had to be perfect. You had to be 11-1 or better to make the playoff. In the 12-team playoff era, you got to be 10-2 or better in most cases. Maybe you can lose 3 games like Clemson did last year, win your conference, and still make the college football playoff. But last year, guys, in a 12-team playoff, we saw just 2 games that really came down to the wire. Yeah, Texas and Arizona State was a thrilling double overtime game. Yes, Notre Dame and Penn State was amazing when it came down to the last second field goal. And if you look at this proposal, we're now asking for more automatic qualifier spots. People don't even like the automatic qualifier discussion surrounding the 16-team league. Now we're going to go to 28 and have 7 automatic qualifiers for the SEC, which means last year, Texas, Georgia, Tennessee, Bama, LSU, South Carolina, and Ole Miss would have all made the playoff. That's what we want, really? We don't want Ole Miss to have to suffer for their loss to the 4-8 Kentucky Wildcats. We don't want LSU to suffer at 8-4 for the loss they had to the USC Trojans in week 1. We don't want any suffering. We just want everybody to get in. What about the Big Ten, where Oregon, Indiana, Penn State, Ohio State, Illinois, and Iowa would all make the field? That's 6. And by the way, a team in Michigan that was 5-5 through 10 games. Yeah, you know what? All those losses that you had, Michigan, doesn't matter. It's fine. Still come to the party. It's all good. Come on in. That blowout you had at Texas in week 2, doesn't matter. You're still in the playoff. Give me a break, man. What about the 5 teams that would make it from the ACC? SMU, Clemson, Miami, Syracuse, and Louisville. Yeah, we don't want Miami to feel the pain of that Syracuse defeat. That game doesn't matter. Don't worry, Miami, you're still in. It's all good. No problem at all. You're still in. What about the Big 12, where Arizona State, Iowa State, BYU, Colorado, and Baylor would all make it? Yeah, Baylor, don't worry about that Hail Mary you gave up to Colorado. It's no problem. Doesn't matter. Don't worry about the 2-4 start. Doesn't matter. No, you don't need to agonize over that 2-4 start. It's no problem. You're still in. It's all good. What about the group of 5? Boise State, they were great. They deserved to be in. Last year, they were excellent. They had 1 loss to Oregon. What about Army? Yeah, Army, you can come on in and you get to play Bama in the first round. Awesome. That'd be great. Really, that's a game we absolutely have to have. Can't wait to watch that one for sure. What about the at-large selections of Notre Dame? For sure. Deserve it. No doubt about it. What about UNLV? Make it in there at 10-2. Yeah, don't worry. UNLV, you're lost to Boise State in the Mountain West Championship. You're lost in the regular season to Boise State. Doesn't matter. It's fine. You're good. You're still in. I mean, it's a ridiculous concept. So, just throw it away. We all know what the Big 10's trying to do here. Big 10 wants to get to 16 teams. So if they just present a 28-team field, then it's going to warm people up more to the 16-team field. When in reality, we can just stay at 12. I'm good with 12. Are you good with 12? Because I think we crowned a worthy champion last year. I think we'll crown a worthy champion again this year. And guess what? You actually have to be pretty good in the regular season to get there. You don't just get benefit of the doubt after benefit of the doubt after benefit of the doubt. It's ridiculous. Get rid of that proposal. It's absurd. That'll do it for us here at Always College Football. Appreciate all of you guys so much that have fought back and have given us great ratings the last couple of weeks, man. The numbers are starting to turn. We are greatly, greatly appreciative of those of you that have supported the show for many, many years. Tell your friends that we're covering the sport the right way here. We're trying to set things up. We're trying to inform. We're trying to make it fun. We're trying to make it enjoyable because the college football season is right upon us, man. I know you guys are as excited as we are. So for all of us here at ACF, for Mark, Jake, Jack, the other Jack, intern Sam, I'm Greg. We hope you have an amazing day. And remember, it's always college football. Hey guys, it's Greg McElroy. Thanks for watching Always College Football. Make sure you like, rate, and subscribe to ESPN's YouTube channel and wherever you listen to your podcasts.